Welcome to From the King's Pen. I'm Arthur Diaz, and I'm here to share with you insights on learning, writing, speaking, and trying to live a little bit better day by day. Today my guest is Matt Hogan. He's a martial artist and a writer, and someone who devotes his life to pursuing his interests. And that's the right word for him, as you will see, devotion. He dives all in to any pursuit, anything he does. He takes it to heart. He shares with us his motivations, why he started with martial arts and where that led him, why he started the Move Me Quotes website, which is his site with inspirational quotes that, as the name says, move him, and how he became a writer, how he started his blog, and what his journey has been so far. He shares a lot of inspiration, a lot of actionable advice, and I'm sure you can learn a lot from him. So I'll leave you with our guest, Matt Hogan. Matt Hogan, my friend, welcome to From the King's Pen. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
All right, man. I want to dive right into something that interested me by looking up on your Twitter and from your website, from everything. You seem to be quite focused on changing people's lives in your own life through words. Would you say that that's your life's purpose so far?
Well, I can certainly say that it has added a very powerful component to my life's purpose.
Okay.
There are so many different things that I've done in life, and there are so many different avenues in which I've had the privilege of being able to influence and impact people. Words has been the one that I've been focused on most heavily in the past year or two.
Okay.
And so words, I have found to be transformational, and they have been so powerful, not only just for me being able to influence others, but me influencing myself. There's been so much I've learned about myself through this journey, so much that I've learned about who I am and what I believe, and just finding clarity in my thinking. And through that process of finding clarity, I have been able to exponentially increase my ability to influence others, simply because of the opportunities I have as a martial art instructor. I teach people every single day. I interact with people every single day. And a lot of, the influence that I have is through word of mouth. And so a lot of it's through oral teaching. And so there's a lot of that influence that comes with it. But I speak better now because of the writing that I've done. And it's all interconnected. And so I would certainly say, to answer your question, words has become a very powerful tool, not only for influencing others, but influence myself. And like the better you can influence yourself, the more you're going to be able to influence others, hands down.
No doubt about it. And writing is, I always say, writing and speaking are things that walk hand in hand. They're like sister skills. One will definitely influence the other. And it goes both ways. The better you become at speaking, the better you will become at writing. The better you become at writing, the better you will become at speaking, because you will learn to process your thoughts in different ways and be faster with it, be clearer with it, depending on what you're working on. So your journey with that, and it's interesting you mentioned how much it weighs on influencing yourself. I'd say your journey started with the Move Me Quote website that you have, and you had it for 10 years, right?
That's correct. I started it October 10th, 2010.
All right. So just from the name, I guess you started with something that inspired yourself, or things you were using to inspire yourself. Is that right?
Yep. So I simply, the Move Me Quotes journey started actually through Twitter, which is how we met, which is, it's funny how everything comes full circle. But yeah, I started on Twitter, and it was just in college. I heard everybody talking about it, so I thought I'd give it a shot myself. The idea of 140 characters or less intrigued me, which is what it was back then. And so I was finding ways that I could think of, things that would be worthy or of value to share. And the thing I found myself returning to over and over again were quotes. You know what I mean? I'd find a quote and I would share it, because that's the type of thing I lean into. I like focusing on personal development, self-improvement. It's just, I'm obsessed with it. I've always been obsessed with it. And, I think that through that process of sharing quotes, I spent a lot of time looking at quote websites. And so I would look at these quote websites for inspiration and ideas, and I hated all of them. I can't even tell you. The quote websites I would go to, they were so painful, in the sense that they were like ad websites that had like a few quotes, and you had to like navigate all these ads to find the quotes hidden underneath the ads.
Basically, just trying to hack SEO, right?
It was unbelievable. So yeah, that was what it was back in the day. And then there were other websites that were just not user friendly, not organized well, static pages, and everything just felt like it was just being regurgitated.
Right.
Like especially the top page stuff. It was almost like, one person posted something, and then, the next person copied what this person posted and then added a few others. And it felt like it was always regurgitated. And so I just didn't like it. And so that was where the entrepreneurial idea was planted. And so essentially Move Me Quotes started from that idea of, okay, I like quotes. I want to post them on Twitter, but I also want to be able to reference these again. I don't want to just lose them into the timeline. And so I didn't like the other websites. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to make a website that I enjoy, a website that I would enjoy visiting. And that's going to become a passion project for me. And so it did. And so that's how that journey started for me. I started finding the best quotes I could find. I started indexing them. And the difference with Move Me Quotes versus other websites was rather than making a static page that had all the quotes on it, I would upload each quote individually as a post, and then I would tag it as an individual piece so that it was dynamically sorted. So like if there was one quote that I really liked, I would upload that one quote, and then I would tag it with like, sometimes there's multiple things that the quote could be speaking to, like fear of failure, life, and, overcoming obstacles and whatever, right? I didn't want to make a separate list for all those categories. And so I would just tag it, and then I would upload it. And then when people clicked on the tag, like, I want to see all the quotes based on overcoming obstacles, all the quotes that I tagged would show up. And so it was a dynamic list integration. So it was a cleaner, easier, and it was just a fun way for me to organize those thoughts. But that was definitely my introduction into the creator world. And it was my introduction into, personal development and self-improvement for sure.
That's awesome. And from what you're saying, based on like uploading quote by quote with tags and everything, it sounds work intensive. And that was a side project, right?
Yes.
So I imagined it took quite a bit of discipline to keep up with it.
You're certainly on the right track. It definitely was not an easy process.
Yeah, and from other things you've done, you're a black belt in Tae Kwon-Do, you're a martial artist. Everything that I see about your life, on your Twitter, again, on your blog, discipline seems to be integral to your life. Do you see yourself as a disciplined person? Is that something that is part of your identity?
Yes, 100%. And it's funny because I try to think back of, sometimes I look at the way I approach things and I wonder where the heck I got all the discipline from,
Yeah, that's what's going to be my next question, if you were always like that.
Yeah, so to give you a little context here. So when I grew up in a neighborhood that was a really active, engaged, dynamic community. Everybody was outside. There was always kids playing sports, and I was always playing sports with them. So I was super active as a kid. And then when I turned about 11, maybe 10 or 11 years old, the neighborhood started getting bad. There was a lot of gang violence, and there were shootings around the corner from my house and things like that. And so my parents decided that it was time to move. So we moved to a new neighborhood, and the new neighborhood we moved into was like a complete 180 of what I was used to. So rather than everyone being outside and it being super engaged in like a young, dynamic vibe, it was like a retirement home neighborhood. And I felt like there was never anybody outside. There was never any kids playing, and it was just dull. And so I shifted gears and I started playing video games a lot. And that was my first introduction into video games. I never played them prior to this. So the first video game system I ever got was a PlayStation.
Oh, wow.
And that was the first one I ever had, and I was 11 years old. And I got it because I didn't have anything to do. There was no one playing outside. My friends weren't there anymore. I was in a new neighborhood, and it was like nobody was doing anything. And I didn't have any friends around me. So nonetheless, I had to figure something out, but I lost that avenue of exercise. And so here's where I think the self-discipline started for me. When I started playing video games, I gained a bunch of weight. And so I was overweight for a certain period of time in my life. And that I hated how that felt. And I remember that feeling like vividly, about feeling, because I was also like a preteen, and so I'm going through like an identity phase.
Right.
And so I had spent all my life being like this healthy and fit and, you know, whatever, like this kid that was always active. And then all of a sudden, I got completely shifted into this new environment. And then my identity completely shifted. I started gaining weight. I started feeling tired. I started eating junk food. I started playing video games. And it was completely different than what I was used to. And I hated the way it felt. And then I had people starting to make fun of me for it. And so you can imagine the emotional intensity that was building up. So nonetheless, about maybe 6 months later, something like that, a martial arts school opened up around the corner from my house, and it was brand new in the neighborhood. And it caught my eye immediately. I was always really interested in Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and, you know, the whole shebang. I mean, they always caught my attention. So I was always trying to do cool moves and wrestling and all that.
I can relate.
Yeah, when I saw the picture of the kicking guy, I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to try that. So I asked my mom if we could go, and she agreed. And so she took me to the school, and I mean, it was an introduction into an environment of I would equate to like the epitome of discipline. Right. You know what I mean? Like you walk into that environment and you walk into, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, stand tall, don't move, push-ups, sit-ups, squats. I mean, like that was like every day, but I loved it. Right. I was obsessed with it. I mean, I just loved, you know, the community that was centered around, because it wasn't like I was just like in boot camp, but it felt like I was on a mission. I was a part of something that was bigger than myself. And so I took to it, and I surrendered to it, and I immersed myself in it, and I was there every freaking day of the week. I was there, like, I mean, not Sunday, but I was there like Monday through Saturday, and I was there for almost every class they taught, and I was obsessed. And it was because I could see myself not only becoming a part of something bigger than myself, but I could see that being the means through which I could become a better person, stronger person, more fit person, surrounded by people who were doing more active and engaged things. And so awesome. I saw that as being the path. And so I took to it, and I obsessed over it. And that's what led me, I think, down that journey of self-discipline. So yeah. I think that's what started it for sure. It was definitely foundational, was the martial arts training.
Yeah, because traditional martial arts, even more modern martial arts like MMA and boxing, have a strong discipline component to it. But traditional martial arts like Tae Kwon-Do, karate, and so on, have that at their core, right?
Absolutely. It's part of the tenets. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like every martial, like the traditional martial arts has a strong emphasis on character development, and not every MMA or boxing school does. You know, some do, of course. You know, every martial arts school has its own way of doing things, but traditional martial arts does have a strong emphasis on discipline and focus and respect and kindness and community and all of these things. And it's like a part of the training, you know? So yeah, I would say that it was an environment that certainly accentualized that, you know, that ability in me to discipline myself to do what I had to do.
And it's so cool that your story follows the hero's journey of, because you had the change in scenario, the call to adventure, and everything. That's really cool. You really follow the call to adventure there.
I've never had anyone make that comparison, but it's absolutely true. I certainly had that journey, and that's certainly the type of journey, I mean, that I had to go through to get to where I am today.
Right. And now you're at the other end of the journey. Although you're not old, you're the old wise man now. You went from apprentice to master, right? Because you're now the head teacher at the school you started at. Right.
So, you know, I use the term master loosely. You know, I think that there's definitely a lot of weight with that word, and I don't want it to be misconstrued, but I still look at myself as a beginner who's just learning every day. I do want to make that clear. I don't look at myself as someone who's mastered anything, but I do have the privilege of being able to run the school that I took my first class in. So I took my first class, in it was 8. Okay, so this is funny. I was so excited to start that, going back to what I was just saying before. I was so excited to start this martial art class that I memorized the date that I took my first class. It was April 11th, 2001, and I was counting down the days. I couldn't wait until my first class was coming up, and I literally remember it still. So that was my first class, and being able to go in and participate in it and, get sucked into that, like I told you before, I mean, it became an obsession for me in the best way. Now, one thing led to the next, and, I started, first I started taking more classes than I was required to. Then I started taking other classes that were higher than me. And then I started taking and helping classes that were lower than me. And then I started helping all of the friggin' classes. And then I became a junior instructor. And then I became an assistant instructor. And then became a regular instructor. And then, the opportunities just kept coming for me.
Right.
And then it was just about, it was right over the pandemic, right over the quarantine, that the person who was the head instructor of the school had a child. And so he decided to be a stay-at-home dad. And that was the essentially opening for me to take on the reins of running the school in full. And so that was, it's just dedication to the process. And I was always committed to bettering myself as a teacher and instructor and a person of influence. And, there it is. 20 years later, it was given to me.
Full circle, huh?
Yeah, it was a really cool opportunity. But so
see,
sure.
You're so much in the hero's journey that I can quote Darth Vader here and say that the student has become the master.
Well, it's funny you say that because I do have a test coming up too. I'm eligible to test for in our school we would call it a 5th degree black belt, and so that's the next level black belt for me, and I'm testing this December for that.
Wow.
And it takes about 20 years of training before you can be eligible for that rank to even test for it. So yeah, it's been quite the journey.
That's amazing. And you say that both in your blog and even with the quote website, you suffered from imposter syndrome when we were starting out. Did you ever feel that with martial arts, or was martial arts so much an obsession that you just dove into it and it never affected you?
That's a great question. So imposter syndrome in the martial arts for me, here's what I did feel. So I was one of the smaller guys. I wasn't one of the big 6 foot, 180, 200 pound guys.
Right. And
so I definitely had self-limiting beliefs around maybe my size, right? Me being about 5'9", like 150, you know what I mean? Like that's, not really, the biggest guy in the room. But I think what I did, because I didn't feel like I had that innate maybe blessing of maybe size or natural speed or whatever, natural talent, I think that you could also reason that was another, contributor to the drive that I had wanting to be there every single day of the week. It was because I had that feeling that I was smaller than, maybe not as good as. I felt like I had to make up for it. And so I think the sheer quantity of time and energy and effort that I put into the process of learning was directly related to that lack that I felt. I felt a little bit of a lack, and so I felt like I had to make up for it. And so I obsessed over quantity. And so I put in as much time and energy into it as I possibly could to make up for it. So I did feel like an imposter at times, because as I was coming up, there were times when I would have to, teach adult classes as a teenager. I mean, I would be like 17, 18 years old teaching a class of adults and who were in their 30s, 40s, 50s in the middle of like professional careers, coming in to learn about this stuff. And it's like, who am I to teach these guys what it is? But you have to remind yourself that, there are things that they know that I don't, and there are things that I know that they don't. And what I'm trying to communicate to them is it's a skill that I've spent a very long time building. And I need to remember that it's not what you see on the outside, it's what I've gained on the inside, and it's what I have to offer through that process. So I think that one of the things across the board for imposter syndrome for me has been finding ways that I can eliminate comparison.
Right.
Because whenever I would go into a class and I would compare myself to like my age to their age, or my size to their size, or my experience to their experience, or whatever, that was when I started getting self-conscious and I started having a hard time of things.
Right.
It was when I dropped the comparisons and I went into the class and said, I have an idea. This is an idea that I've worked a long time to learn about, and I would like to share it with you today. And so that's kind of the approach that I had. It was an approach of humility, of gratitude, of just excitement. And I think that when you approach something with that type of energy, you know what I mean? Like how could that be received poorly? You know, and I think that a lot of people have that issue where when they feel that imposter syndrome, you know, the other reaction you could have is you might tense up and you might turn on that aggression. Like, I'm going to show them, you know, what I think and what I believe, and I'm going to kind of force it on them, and I'm going to bullhead my way through it. But that gets received bad, and then you start, the cycle gets turned the wrong way. So that's a good question, but I would say that was probably how the experience went for me.
You give me a lot to unpack there. First, starting with what you said last, you went the gentle way in a certain way, right? Instead of trying to force it, you dropped expectations. You were just, here's the value I can provide. Take it or leave it.
Right.
You were like, here it is.
Right. And that's been key not only for martial arts, but for writing too.
Yeah.
And that was something that's what Seth Godin wrote about in his book, The Practice, right? Shipping Creative Work. It's an outstanding book that I recommend to you and all the listeners. But one of the fundamental ideas in the book is about looking at your work as being a gift. It's a gift to the world. And some people maybe don't want your gift. But guess what? It's not for them. You know, there are people that are going to love to receive your gift that's packaged in a way that accents your unique take on the world, your thoughts, your beliefs, and the time and dedication and care you put into it. You know, they would love to receive that. You know what I mean? Like, so don't sit there and not give gifts to the world because you're scared a couple people aren't going to want it. You know what I mean? Like, if they don't want it, then who cares? So that's the approach that has helped me in martial arts and in writing, because I went through a long phase of imposter syndrome, I would say longer for writing than martial arts. I went through imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's something I want to get into, because from what you said, with martial arts, you a little bit overcompensated where you were feeling that you had weaknesses to become a better martial artist, so you would feel prepared. And from what you share, your 10 years journey to start actually writing for real, I have a feeling you did the same thing. You were overcompensating for feeling, oh, maybe I'm not that good. So is that a correct impression?
Yes.
You were like kind of being like, I gotta be prepared for this, and a little bit overcompensating?
Yes, 100%. And that's my personality. That's my personality for sure. Before I step into something, I do want to have the feeling of being over-prepared. And that has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. You know what I mean? Like, I'm slow to pull the trigger, but when I pull the trigger, you know I'm going to fire.
You're ready for it.
Yeah, that's how I operate. So for the writing, the way it worked for me was I spent probably 5 years uploading quotes to Move Me Quotes, and I would not add any of my own words. I was way too self-conscious. I mean, think about it. I was making lists of the best things I could find that anyone ever said about certain topics. And then it's like, how the hell am I going to add anything to that when I got people like Martin Luther King and Tony Robbins and Oprah, and I'm uploading quotes from people that are like, you know, just legends. And so it's like, why am I going to add to this? So anyways, it took me about 5 years before I finally started adding my own words to it. And I think it was because I started catching on to themes. I started finding ways that I could add my own experiences.
Right.
And then I started finding ways that I could kind of like add little packages without, you know, getting too nervous. I was just dipping my toe in the water, you know what I mean? And so I did that for a little bit. Then I started a separate blog, which is what any writer does when they don't want anyone to read their work.
Right.
They start a separate blog. So I started a blog that nobody knew about, that I just wrote on, and I only shared with a few people. And that gave me some confidence, because I felt like I started, you know, building ideas up, and then I started getting some momentum. And then after it, like I said, about, you know, maybe just a little bit more dabbling, a little bit more introduction, I started adding a little bit more of my own thoughts, maybe a separate blog section on Move Me Quotes so more people would see it. It wasn't until 10 years later, and that was in January of 2020, that I finally felt confident enough to really like commit to being a writer. You know, and I would not say that I was a writer prior to this point. You know, prior to that point, I was a dabbler. You know, I dabbled and I was too self-conscious, and I wrote a little bit here and there, maybe like once a week. But it was in January of 2020 that I decided that I was going to start writing every day, and I wasn't going to miss. I was just going to take a quote. I was going to write a couple things about it that, you know, intertwined my experiences and ideas, and I was just going to share it as a gift. And I did that for, well, I've done that ever since, essentially. So I haven't stopped doing that to this day. So it's been a wild journey, but that's how I overcame it. It took me a long damn time of remembering that it's not about me comparing myself to Tony Robbins. It's about me offering my own unique experiences to this, you know, idea, concept, or whatever that maybe somebody might be able to take something from.
I was going to say the theme of comparisons comes up again, huh? There, because that's what you were doing at first, trying to compare yourself to the legends.
Yes, 100% what I was doing.
When a lot of the times creation, I joked once on Twitter, not really joked, it was a thought that we rarely ever create. We connect ideas in new ways, because creating something absolutely new after I don't know how many thousand years of humanity is kind of an impossible task at this point. It takes a really enlightened soul to really create something. But what we create is connections, unique points of view, perspectives, and we don't have to compare ourselves for that. Right.
And there's a brilliant piece that goes right on that. It's called "Everything Is a Remix," and I can't remember who it's by, but it's like a docu-series. Like, it's a real short.
Right.
I think it's on YouTube, actually. It's like a real short, like 3-part video series that pretty much outlines how everything that we ever engage with in the world is a remix of other things.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like this component remixed with this component, and it makes this component. Like you said, it's very rare that something brand new that is, you know, unlike anything else that we've ever seen before comes along. It's just, you know, everything is a remix, and when you look at everything as a remix, then you can start, you know, taking pressure off yourself to make something brand new.
Yeah, but I can definitely relate to the comparison thing. I held myself back a lot because of that, and I still say that one of Jordan Peterson's rules is what freed me from it, with the don't compare yourself to others, who others are today, compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
Yes.
That had such a positive impact in my life, because just like you, would led me to stop looking at what others were doing, or who someone who was in a different journey or 10 years ahead of me was doing, and being like, okay, am I doing better? Am I moving in the direction I want to move? Then everything's okay.
Right.
Because otherwise you get bogged down into going crazy, because everyone has a different journey, everyone's in a different stage, everyone has a different pace. So it's useless to compare yourself to other people.
I think that you're 100% on. And it's funny because that was what led to my switch from Instagram to Twitter. And so we might have never even crossed paths if I didn't make that switch, because I spent most of my social media time on Instagram. And this is prior to like March of 21.
Okay.
So I rejoined Twitter. Like, okay, so I had an account on Twitter that was pretty much just stagnant. I started using it, like I told you, and that was in 2010, and that's when I was uploading quotes and things. But then when I made Move Me Quotes, the separate Twitter account, then I just dropped off of my personal one, and I didn't do anything to it for 8 years. So it was just an inactive account. And so when I rejoined, I think it was Nicholas Cole that, you know, was talking about the power of Twitter. And so I kind of jumped back on, and I started like looking around at the community of writers that was there.
Right.
And then I started engaging, and then I started meeting people, and then I started having a good time of it. And then I started deciding, like, I was like looking at everything. I'm like, oh my God, like this is 1,000 times better than Instagram. And so I made the decision, and I'm not saying this in general, I'm just saying for me, right? From my experience, because what was happening on Instagram for me is that I was starting to compare myself to everybody else's highlight reels. It's what we talk about all the time. You know, everyone shares their highlight reels on Instagram and Facebook, and when you're immersed in everybody else's highlight moments, your regular moments start to feel like shit.
Yeah.
So you have to, you have to keep that in check. And so for me, that meant I pretty much only go on Instagram maybe once a week now. And I spend all of my time on Twitter because the difference is night and day. Instagram is physical, superficial appearance first. It's like aesthetics. And in Twitter is mind first, community first, ideas first. And it's about connecting the mind before the superficiality. So that's been a tremendous switch for me. And it's just a common theme. The more you can eliminate comparison in your life in general, I think the happier you're going to be, period. Yep. I think that's just such a powerful realization that I had recently that I think would just lead to that would just help so many people in their lives if they can eliminate comparison. The upside to that is just ceilingless.
Yeah. And I feel that on Twitter. On Twitter, I feel you see a lot more of budding creativity, a lot more building, a lot more of people actually sharing even failures. Like, okay, I tried this, didn't work, fell flat on my face. Here's why. Here's what you shouldn't do.
Right.
And that brings a different level. You feel, of course, you have to curate your feed on Twitter, because if you simply go in with the trending topics, you're going to be sucked into a vortex of politics, of negative stuff. But if you do like you and I did and look for writers communities, the tech community, the fitness community, you find a lot of people who are like, hey, we're building something together. Come join us.
Right. And that's a very powerful mindset change.
It really is.
And it's really, I think one of the other key differences between Instagram and Twitter is that, and this can't be understated, is just the ability to create community, right? So for there it is. For everyone listening, that's my stuff.
Okay.
All right, you should be done now. All right. So on Instagram, right, you get people to follow your account, to like your account, to follow you. It's almost audience building, right? It's about building an audience that can follow your message, and that is what it is. For Twitter, it's very much so community building. And the difference is that when you build a community, every member in the community can interact with each other. So it's like a multifaceted web. Yeah, whereas on Instagram, it's about collecting people that can sit in an audience and look at you. But like on Twitter, it's like everybody's connected to everybody. Like me and you are having this chat, but then, we're just a part of one writing community that doesn't have one central person. Like we're not an audience pointing towards one person. We are a dynamic community. We'll have a conversation, and then we'll go have conversations with other people in our community. Exactly. And it's all interconnected. So that has been completely like mind-blowing for me. The idea that like, I'm not trying to build an audience. I want to be a part of a community. And that, another revolutionary change for me, for sure, in my life.
You feel that has impacted your writing too? The way you look at your blog and at Move Me quotes and everything?
Yes, I think that the impact that has had on me is just the ability to connect with more like-minded people so that I could better relate to them in their journeys. Because what I was going through was, just that process of trying to produce as much as I possibly could. I was burning myself out. Right. I was really like, trying to kill myself to get things done. And I was audience building prior to Twitter. I was just building an audience. I was trying to get as many people as I could to follow Move Me Quotes and go to the website. I was just like a broadcast message. But when I shifted to Twitter, it changed the way I approached my writing, because I realized that I'm not just trying to broadcast a message. I'm trying to connect with people so that we can relate on our journeys. And then it started turning into an integrated process. Right. And so it was a two-way form of communication. So on Twitter, I would share something and someone would actually say something back. And I was like, oh, look at that, feedback, right? Because I wasn't really getting that with Move Me Quotes. It was very much one way. This was the two-way source of communication. And that's the beauty of Twitter. And writing, and the other thing Twitter did for me, and I'll say this too, is that learning how to be more concise in my writing was a key thing that I needed to work on. Because like I told you earlier, when I started my daily writing in January 1st, 2020, I was doing what I always do. I was doing way the hell more than I should. I was literally writing an article a day. I was writing about a 5-minute article a day. and it was long, and it was arduous, and it was just tiresome, and it just like drove me nuts. But that quantity gave me a lot to, kind of work off of in retrospect. So the arc of my journey was, shit ton of work. I put in way more than I should have. I was writing way more than I should have. And then finally I got to a point when I joined Twitter, it was like, oh, concise. How can I cut this down? And then I heard other writers talking about cut things down. And then my arc started turning this way and started writing less. But I felt like the meaning always kind of stayed at a good level. You know what I mean? Like it was still just as meaningful, but I was learning how to say those meaningful things in far fewer words.
Right.
So that was another big thing Twitter did for me, was teach me how to be more concise in my writing, for sure.
Looking back at that whole journey then, do you regret having had the personal blog first, like instead of going into the Move Me quotes and leveraging that audience, or do you feel that it was a good choice for you to wait, build your skill, build things up, and feel like you were prepared? Would you have done anything differently?
I don't think I would have done anything differently. I think that if I didn't spend the time I did on Move Me quotes, I would not have anything near enough to say that I have to say today. So the way I look at it is, and the word I always come back to is overflowing. So for those first 10 years with Move Me quotes and with curating websites and, being self-conscious of posting my own words, I was just adding as much as I could to my brain. So I was like a sponge. I was absorbing everything I read. I was taking it from the book and I was uploading it, onto the website. Unique quotes that haven't been shared before, quotes that were uniquely found through me, through these books. And so I would upload them, and I spent years doing that. And so after, 100 books, you get to a point where you're like, oh my God, there's just so much in here. And then that's what happened on January 1st. It was like, it just started pouring out. And I think that's what sustained my ability to have continued writing every day for as long as I have. We're closing in on 2 years now of writing every day. And I still I feel like I still haven't come anywhere near exhausting what I have to say.
That's awesome.
I think it just keeps adding. Like I just keep getting more and more in my thought process because I'm still adding things. So I don't think I would change my journey. I think spending as much time as I did curating certainly gave me the material that I needed or would have needed to sustain a daily writing habit of creating.
It's pretty cool because I can see your story with all of that, with it starts with a monologue of the authors talking to you. You're just taking it in. Then it becomes a dialogue between you and the authors as you start interjecting with your comments on the quotes. It becomes a monologue from you to your audience, from what you said first, just like building the audience. And now you're at a stage with Twitter where you're looking for a dialogue with your audience. And that's, again, a journey coming full circle.
That's a great way to put it. That's absolutely where I am at. Yep.
That's so cool. And what are your writing projects now? Are you going to keep up with the blog? I know you have your newsletters. Do you plan to go for a book, for a course? What is in your future as Matt the writer? You already shared as the martial artist you're going for another exam, you're going to graduate further. But what is up for you as the writer? What are your next goals?
So right now, my number one daily priority is my daily blog. I post, I share one inspiring or maybe one thought-provoking idea every day. And I send it out to people on the email list. And I try to send it out in 280 words or less so that people can read it in about 1 minute or less. So that's my goal. A 1 minute post every day. That's kind of like that's my MO. And that's how I want to be known is, a thought-provoking idea every day, 1 minute a day. And that's my number one priority as a writer is I want to get that done. And I want to make that as valuable as I can and as short and as concise as I can. And it was inspired by Seth Godin's blog. So he does that. He does, one post a day. And I just love that drip method. It's really good for building self-discipline. It's a really good habit for me. And it's a great way to kind of pay attention to what I'm thinking about at the current time. So that's my number one writing commitment. My second writing commitment is, obviously posting to Twitter because I think that that's a great exercise is continuing to pay attention to my thoughts, sharing them consistently with the community so I can keep getting feedback on them. And those, my tweets are what I use as fuel for my daily blog. So, Twitter is 280 characters or less. My blog is 280 words or less. And so that's how I frame the two together. Now, as far as long-term goes, I plan on doing that daily blog for the foreseeable future. I'm just going to keep doing that I don't really see that stopping anytime soon.
All right.
Yeah. So as far as other projects, I am actually in the process of writing a book too. And the book I'm working on right now is Confronting Life Like a Martial Artist. A lot of the problems I see people facing in the world, I think could be related back to core tenets and values that if people worked on improving or learned how to improve them, it would solve so many of the bigger problems in their life that would solve the smaller problems too. So a lot of I think, small problems that I see people complaining about and talking about, they're just symptoms of bigger problems. And the bigger problems could be dealt with, bigger or more direct ways of confronting these bigger problems with the values and morals that would essentially act as a compass to guide you through life. So things like learning how to build up, like we talked about, discipline, how to build up your courtesy, how to build up your perseverance, your indomitable spirit. Like these things, I think when broken down and analyzed and presented in a way that was digestible and easy to understand, I think that could help a lot of people. And so that's why I call it Confronting Life Like a Martial Artist, because in martial arts, those core tenets are foundational to everything that we do. And so by breaking it down for other people and, presenting a situation in which people feel like they're being essentially, people, as far as I see it, are in like fetal position and life is just beating the shit out of them. You know what I mean? They're just on the ground and life is just hammering them. And so it's like, okay, what can I do to help you get off your back, stand back up and confront this life opponent like a true and worthy, fight, like an honest, prepared for, ready to go confrontation. How can I help you get ready for that confrontation? And that's what the book's about. It takes you from being on your back, getting the shit beat out of you, to essentially, by the end of the book, having all the tools you need to be hyper prepared to fight back in a way that you essentially would hope to see in a boxing match on live TV.
Awesome. That's pretty cool. Matt, if there's anything that your story shows here is the power of discipline and the power of being consistent. What message would you leave for someone who's struggling with those, someone who wants to become more disciplined, who wants to develop self-control?
So the first thing that I always recommend is you have to figure out if you're willing to do whatever it is that you're trying to do for an extended period of time. Now, for me, I'm extreme. I think in terms of, really convincing terms for myself. So before I commit to doing anything, I ask myself, is this something I'm willing to do for the rest of my life? So again, that's extreme. But for me, if the answer is no, then my follow-up question is, okay, if you're not willing to do it for the rest of your life, then how long are you willing to do it for? And the problem I see for most people as far as self-discipline goes is they set out on paths and they commit to things for like 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or 100 days. But it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen after that? After that, you're probably going to go back to what you were doing before. Now, of course, I'm speaking to things that would require self-discipline, things like improving your lifestyle. So that's particularly what I'm speaking to. If you're trying to, eat healthier, work out more regularly, things like that, like how do you improve discipline for those? Or you're trying to write, become a better writer, blah, blah. It's going to require a long-term commitment because you can't skip the process of hard work. And if you do skip the process of hard work, it's going to come to light later on and you're going to be exposed as being someone who didn't put the work in, and it's going to come and it's going to kick you in the ass later. So, you have to find a way that you can commit to a long period of time, and you have to ask yourself, am I willing to do this for a long period of time? If the answer is no, then you have to adjust what you were just about to do so that you are willing to do it. And a lot of times that means boiling it down, right? Making it less of a commitment. So maybe instead of writing a 5-minute article every day, maybe you commit to writing 1 tweet a day, right? That has some type of positive message in it, which is a challenge that I know that, I think you're a part of as well, but nonetheless, I digress. So committing to something that you feel is your minimum viable habit that can propel you forward and you feel like you can do. Now that's number one, right? So before you set out on any path, are you willing to do it for the long run? And for me, that means for the rest of my life until I decide that isn't viable any longer, right? So that's number one. The second thing, and this is the other key component to self-discipline a lot of people miss. What are you going to do on the days when you don't want to do it? You have to have a plan for that, right? And you have to acknowledge the fact that day is going to come. You are going to have a day when you are not going to want to do the thing, right? And so you have to figure out what your backup plan is going to be when that happens. So I'll give you an example. For exercise, right? I'm committed to working out every day, once a day, different part of the body. I have a rotation going, so it's not like I'm working out the exact same body parts every day, but I have a rotation where every day I exercise because I know that on the days that I exercise, I feel better. And so I want to make sure I'm always doing that. So on the days when I don't want to exercise, what is my backup plan, right? So for me, that means two things. Number one, I'm going to try to exercise for 5 or 10 minutes every time anyway. So that's the first thing, because what I realized, and what I'm sure you've read about before too, is that starting is what's actually hard, right? Yep. So if you can find a way to just get yourself there, just show up, then getting started is probably going to propel you forward. But I don't let that be the expectation. The expectation for me is, at minimum, I have to show up. If I feel tired, or I feel fatigued, or I feel sick, or whatever, I'm still going to show up. I'm going to turn up to where my gym is in my basement. So I turn up to my basement gym. And then my second thing I have to do is I have to roll. So I have to do foam rolling, because foam rolling is good for you no matter what you're going through. You know what I mean? Foam rolling is an excellent myofascial release, is excellent for you. And so I do that every day. And so that's the second thing. So I have to show up, number one. I have to do foam rolling, number two. And then number three is, after I've done those two things, I will then decide if I can continue with the rest of my workout, whatever the workout is for that day. So those are my minimum, and I'll show up, and that's the key. Showing up is the key, right? That's the key to the long term, is being able to find ways that you can continue to show up, because it's that process of keeping your momentum going. Like I just saw you post the other day. You post up your streaks. Yep. Your writing streak, and I just saw you put that up the other day about that. So it's the same thing. It's about keeping the streak alive.
Yep.
Because it's harder to start a stopped body than it is to keep a body in motion. And so if I can keep my body in motion and I can keep my streak alive, I know that momentum is going to help me. There are days when I go to work out and I don't even think about it. Like it's not a debate. It's not a question. There is nothing in my mind that stops me. It's just programmed inside of me. And so that's a beautiful thing. Most people have to fight life and death to show up to a workout. I mean, it's brutal. The amount of mental confrontation they have to go through just to show up to a workout is awful. And the way that you stop that is by making it non-negotiable in the beginning. You have to force it. You make it non-negotiable, you force it. And then once you get the momentum going, your mind will just slowly realize, all right, this is what it is. We're just going to do it today, and let's just get it done. Yeah. So if anyone's trying to build discipline up, it's those two things. Number one, before you commit to anything, are you willing to commit to it for the rest of your life? And number two, what are you going to do on the days when you don't want to do it? Right. Because that day's coming, and if you don't have a plan for that, then that's what's going to mess you up. And the last thing I'll plug in there real quick is, if you ever do miss a day, if there's a day that you do miss, then never miss 2 days in a row. Because that's the start of a new habit, right? One day is just a mistake. 2 days is the start of a new habit. So never start a new habit in the wrong direction.
Yep.
Always get back on track the next day.
And I don't know what it is. I agree with that 100%, because I don't know what it is, but you take a month or more to start the momentum that will keep you going. 2 days is more than enough to completely kill that momentum.
100%.
I know, because last year I had added a 15-minute abs and core workout every day. No matter what else I worked out, I was doing that.
Yep.
The minute I skipped 2 days in a row of that, it killed that streak.
Yep.
Like I went for over a month without missing a day. Then I missed a day, got back to it. When a week happened that I had, I don't know, I think I had an insane amount of work or something, and I missed 2 days, that momentum was gone.
that is true for everything in life. And that's
It
another
is.
key thing to remember is that it's way the hell harder to build up than it is to tear down.
Yep.
Building is 100% harder because our world, our universe always moves towards chaos.
Yeah.
And so chaos, destruction is always going to be
natural pull. The natural pull of the universe is always towards entropy, towards things collapsing on themselves. So it's always going to be easier to move in that direction.
Right, but that's precisely why it's the people that are willing to do what's harder that should get the reward. You know what I mean? Like if you're not willing to put the effort and energy into it, then you're not going to get the benefit on the other side of it. Right? So
100%.
You have to be willing to put forth the effort and energy, and that's why we talked about coming up with ways that you can have your minimum viable. Like what's the smallest thing you could do, and then once you get the momentum going, how can you add a little bit to that, and then add a little bit to that, and then you keep adding a little bit until you have a pace that's good for you, right? Because we are running marathons. Our lives are marathons, and we don't want to set out on a marathon at a sprinter's pace. That's just asinine. You know what I mean? So you've got to make sure that you're doing it at a pace that you can sustain for a long period of time. So pacing is everything for self-discipline. If you want to have good self-discipline, keep your pace alive.
Turtle in the hair, right? Long and slow and steady wins the race.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Man, thank you for that. I agree 100% with that. I have a video on this channel exactly on that, on starting slow, small goals, build a system for it, build a system so you won't fail, so you'll have backups, because all of that, man, in 3 years, I lost 60 pounds.
Wow.
I gained weight back during the lockdowns. In a few months, I lost like 20 pounds again because it was like, when I was able to get back to all of my routines with gym and everything, I was like, I'm not going to let this stop me again. I was like on a mission.
Yeah.
And it's just that. Build a system that will enable you to do the things you want.
There's a brilliant quote by James Clear, and James Clear said that we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems.
Damn, that's great. I love 100%. James Clear.
Everybody has big goals. Big goals are abundant. Everybody wants to have, these crazy lifestyles. I don't have to go into it, right? Everybody has big goals, but it's the systems that's the game changer.
Yep.
Right? And so whatever your systems are that allow you to approach your days, that is what's going to lead you to wherever you're going to end up, not your goals, right? It's your systems. And so if you can get your systems right, then the path of your life is going to go right. But you can't overlook the systems. The systems have to be in place. Everything else is going to be, that's the crux of all personal development. It's the systems and the self-discipline, period.
100%. Man, thank you for sharing all of that. Thank you for sharing your story with us. It's quite inspiring. Having like someone who's gone through a real hero's journey and gone full circle is great, and I'm sure a lot of people will be inspired by it. People who want to follow you, who want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Best place is matthogan.blog. That's the website. That's where I post my daily writings.
All right.
You'll find the link to my Twitter. That's where I spend my time social media. So it's matthogan123, and that's it. Twitter is where I spend my social media time. matthogan.blog is where I spend my writing time. And if anyone's interested in spending time, that's where you'll find me.
All right, and there they can find your newsletter and everything, right?
Yep, that's right.
That's great, man. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing with us.
I thank you for having me on the show, and thank you for your time and awesome questions. This was a real joy.
This was great, man. And for you watching, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a comment, share this with your friends if this inspired you. And soon I'll be back with more insights and doses of learning, writing, speaking, and trying to live a little bit better day by day from the King's Band.
Sitting in the highest tower on a castle made of sand, watching the pieces all fall down. I don't own a throne, no, I don't even own a crown. I just sit and I watch it all fall down. Sitting here, it gives me the time to take the time and make the time to big, the pieces from my mind.